On March 28, 2022, a Chinese court issued a notice of asset appraisal of a private enterprise in China. The company's self-assessed value was tens of billions of RMB, including 5.1 billion in physical assets, but the appraisal announced by the court was only 686 million RMB. On March 29th, the court announced that the assets were to be held on April 14th, and almost simultaneously, the auction company published its notice to solicit bidders. The private enterprise in question is Dawu Group. What has happened to it, and what's the story behind it? Swen Dawu, the founder of Dawu Group, was arrested in November 2020. 8 months later, in July 2021, he was found guilty of gathering a crowd to storm state institutions, obstructing public service, picking quarrels and provoking troubles, disrupting production and operation, conducting coercive trade, illegal mining, illegal occupation of agricultural land, and illegal absorption of public deposits. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison, and his sons, brothers, and 19 other people were sentenced to between 9 and 12 years in prison. According to Radio Free Asia, a US-based Chinese private entrepreneur expressed her shock upon hearing about the news. She said, "Now this is a gross undervaluation. The court isn't enforcing the law, it's ripping it off. It's a blatant robbery. They use the court system to make the robbery legitimate, to have a court banner to it." Swen Dawu and his group's rise to success, doing things that the CCP sees as an anomaly. So, why was Swen arrested? If you read his story, you will find it incredible, as he can be called an entrepreneur with a conscience. Swen Dawu, 68, was born in northern China. In the early years, he and his wife started their business with 1,000 chickens and 50 pigs and won the honor of being the top chicken farmer in the province. In 1985, he founded the Dawu Group, which had grown over the decade to become one of the top 500 private enterprises in China, with 28 subsidiaries, more than 9,000 employees, and an annual output of more than 3 billion RMB. His parents scavenged for scraps to make ends meet. After starting his own business, founding the Dawu Group, and making his fortune, Swen began building homes, hospitals, gymnasiums, and other facilities, constructing a Dawu city. It allowed him to realize his dream of allowing poor villagers to live peacefully with affordable homes, education, and medical care. He opened a free technical school for peasants and trained them to raise livestock. He invested in a private school with low fees and no fees for poor families. He founded the Dawu Hospital, which didn't allow profits or kickbacks. It even provided free medical care for patients. The company's employees were entitled to a monthly medical benefit at the cost of 1 yuan. There was a large boulder in front of the hospital engraved with the words, "When a patient is admitted, the entire hospital is obligated." He subsidized the hospital using profits from other subsidiaries. These benefits were well received by people and had shaken the authority of local governments. Dawu Group was said to be the first to have realized free medical care for all under the communist regime. Losing money is okay. For example, the Dawu Hospital. It would be my shame if the hospital made money, and would be my honor if the hospital lost money, because I am not short of money. I run the hospital so that it can treat the sick and save people. Why should it make money? Making money is a disgrace to Dawu Group. It can lose money forever. I don't care. I think it's good. What's good about it? After my business is doing well, how much value it will add to my hospital, and how many customers will I have? Why make money during the epidemic? I just don't understand it. In an interview with Tencent Video in June 2013, Swen said his business was conducted in a righteous manner without colluding with government officials and without following the unspoken rules of society. He was therefore considered an enemy by those in the CCP system who practiced the unspoken rules. As a result, his business was under constant scrutiny for tax evasion. Others who come across this matter will have to resort to connections. Every businessman has some connections, and they have to use them to solve the problem. They need to spend a chunk of money, paying a portion to the government and other portions to their connections. Then this matter is settled. This is the unspoken rule. I have a business, and they always assume that I am evading taxes. They keep coming to investigate me, find fault with me, and make trouble. In reality, it's all because they are in financial constraints. They need to collect more taxes. They might as well be straightforward. Why should they go about it this way? They frame people for crimes, calling them thieves, beating them up, and punishing them. This is unbearable. All they want is money. Stop smearing people's reputations and dignity. That's what I can't stand. Swen Dawu was arrested twice, but with very different results. As his business grew, Swen began to reach out to liberal intellectuals in Beijing. By the spring of 2003, he had become an outspoken voice for the rights of peasants and entrepreneurs, speaking at China's top universities. He frequently voiced criticism of the CCP's political system and publicly published articles in support of human rights lawyers. In April 2003, the Shui County Public Security Bureau notified him that 3 articles published on the website of Dawu Group had seriously damaged the reputation of the state authorities and requested that the website be revamped and shut down for 6 months with a fine of RMB 15,000. In May 2003, Swen Dawu borrowed a total of 180 million RMB, or approximately $28 million from local villagers by issuing IOUs on terms higher than the bank's deposit rate. He was subsequently arrested on charges of illegal fundraising. Swen's friends across the country immediately rallied to his defense. Some legal scholars said that the law Sun was accused of violating was worded in such a way as to give authorities broad discretion to prosecute businessmen they didn't like. After 5 months of pleas from people of all social strata, Swen was released. The incident made Swen famous throughout the country. Chinese national television even reported his story. Despite having been arrested and imprisoned, he continued to deal with intellectuals and ex-officials. He provided meeting space for liberal-leaning groups, think tanks, and publications until they were banned in recent years. He maintained close friendships with prominent dissidents even if they were politically unpopular. When the CCP made mass arrests of human rights lawyers in 2015, Swen Dawu publicly offered 100,000 RMB, or about $16,000 in support of those who would defend them. In 2019, he said on social media that the local government hadn't confirmed the possible swine fever in his company, even though 15,000 pigs had died. 2 days later, the central government confirmed the swine fever. In August 2020, a state-owned farm attempted to demolish a building owned by the Dawu Group. Dawu employees tried to stop it, resulting in a confrontation. Local public security intervened, and dozens of Dawu workers and villagers were injured. Dawu Group protested against the local authorities immediately. Shui County has a population of 600,000. Dawu Group alone has employed tens of thousands of workers plus tens of thousands of students in schools. I don't know why they are treating us like this. It's obvious that they are biased towards the state farm because they are state-owned. In reality, the farm is owned by a gang in the name of the state, and they don't provide for the state. Instead, the state subsidizes it. Such a large amount of land, it can be said that tens of thousands of acres of land are monopolized by a few people. On November 11, 2020, Swen and his family were arrested around 1 a.m. According to the Chinese media, Southern Weekly, 6 buses carrying police officers armed with assault rifles, dogs, and ladders showed up at a residential complex owned by the Dawu Group. The first group of police took away Swen and his wife, their 2 sons, and 2 daughters-in-law, as well as other executives. The second group took away the leaders of subsidiaries. A total of 28 people were arrested by the police on suspicion of picking quarrels and provoking trouble. The main reason is that on many occasions I said a lot of things that I shouldn't have said. It provoked them. That is to say, officials of this system enjoy flattery and praise, and nobody likes to listen to criticism. So, when I made some critical remarks, it was very prickly for them, obviously. Plus, my business is doing well and stays far away from them. That is, they have very little relationship with my businesses, very little collusion with them. They want to destroy me. They are all in agreement on this. I said I could be a guest in Zhongnan High, CCP's central headquarters the day before, and a prisoner the next day. Upon their arrest, Swen and his family didn't have lawyers because Chinese law requires signed permission from family members to hire a lawyer, and they were all arrested. Unlike in 2003, virtually no one came forward to plead for his release. Why? It's because on July 1st, 2015, the Chinese government passed a so-called new national security law. It has pretty much shattered China's civil society. A member of the former party leader Jiang Zemin's faction was in charge of the NPC that passed the law. It was the same year that massive arrests of human rights lawyers occurred and independent journalists were silenced. Officials, even retired ones, knew not to speak out. A former journalist who wrote an influential article about Suen Dawu in 2003 is now unable to find a place to have a voice. A close friend of Swen's says he was warned by the CCP security officials not to talk to journalists. Those who used to receive help from Suen were afraid, and no one dared to come to his aid. On July 28, 2021, the court convicted Suen and his family of 8 counts of gathering a crowd to storm a state organ and obstructing public service, and sentenced him to 18 years in prison and a fine of 3.11 million RMB, or around 490,000 US dollars. Swen's sons were sentenced to 12 years in prison and a fine of 1.9 million RMB, or approximately 300,000 US, while his 2 brothers were sentenced to 12 and 9 years in prison and fines of 510,000 and 550,000 RMB respectively. 19 employees were also sentenced to 1 to 12 years in prison. The court also ruled that the Dawa Group was to be fined approximately 4.8 million US dollars, recovered so-called illegal gains of over 14 million RMB, or approximately over 2 million US dollars, and refunded over 1 billion RMB, or 163 million US dollars of illegal fundraising. Why does the CCP want to crack down on private enterprises? Analysts believe that the development of private enterprises poses a danger to the CCP's political security. First, private enterprises will demand a share of political power or democratization when they grow big. Second, they may become the promoters of future color revolutions. Therefore, the development of private enterprises must be monitored and meet the prerequisites of political security. In addition to establishing a physical Dawu city, Suen created a new business model with the concept of separation of powers. Dawu City consisted of a supervisory board of ownership, a board of directors for policy making, and a management board for execution. In this way, a new system of private ownership, public governance, and shared benefits has been developed in which private enterprises are constitutionalized and labor and management are governed publicly. The Dawu Group has taken up the medical care, education, and senior care of the locals, turning the enterprise into a society. Perhaps the CCP is worried about the government authority being marginalized if the model of the Dawu Group grows popular and leads to the formation of independent forces in society. According to the Voice of America, Liu Xiaobo, who won the 2010 Nobel Peace Prize and was persecuted to death by the CCP, wrote a long article about the Suen Dawu case. He said, once the Chinese authorities discovered the continued growth of peasant entrepreneurs like Suen Dawu, especially his entrepreneurial conscience, contempt for power and monetary favors, courage to speak out, and his financial resources and organizational ability, the ability to bring solutions for poverty alleviation in the context of advocating for the peasants' rights, and the possibility of being a new breed of a peasant leader, the authorities are bound to use vague laws to control the situation. Suen Dawu and his Dawu Group thus would fall victim to the draconian rule of law. Qiao Yashui, editor-in-chief of the U.S. English language website China Change, said, Suen Dawu started with 100 acres of barren land, 1,000 chickens and 50 pigs, and in 36 years built a $2 billion farming enterprise before losing everything to the Communist Party. What is the Chinese story? This is the Chinese story. What is the fate of the Chinese people? This is the fate of the Chinese people. It's a curse.